The trek through this 4,000-mile labyrinth of ice and land on the top of our planet is one of the most dangerous journeys in the world.
20-foot seas, sails torn, crew worn down. It was quite intense.
For centuries, navigators have given their lives trying to find a sailing passage between Europe and Asia. Make one wrong turn, and sailors have ended up like this, frozen in time in the unforgiving ice just shy of the North Pole. This Northwest Passage, as it's called, is a puzzle, a matrix, a maze. Pathways open and close without warning. Even today, towering icebergs rising 300 feet above the surface can trap a ship for a month or more. The Arctic Ocean is so unforgiving, 75,000 horsepower icebreakers get stuck up here. So if that's the case, what chance does the crew of this tiny sailboat have?
We thought going through the Northwest Passage would be a lock. No problem at all. Our expectations met a very different reality.
This little ship's bold plan is to make it from Alaska all the way across the Arctic Ocean through the Northwest Passage and over to Europe before the ice closes in for the season. Sailing less than 800 miles shy of the North Pole is going to make this one tough journey through the icebergs. The sailboat is taking the long, dangerous way across the Arctic.
David, thank you, David.
I, on the other hand, am taking a shortcut. But still, that means 5 separate planes, each smaller than the last. So hello. I've come up here to learn about the Arctic and to see if the melting ice has any effects on our weather back home. But first, one stop to see the spectacular northern lights in Yellowknife, Canada. And finally, touchdown. Thank you so much.
See you later.
Thank you, bye. Just arriving in Cambridge Bay, which is 1,400 miles south of the North Pole. We're just about 176 miles above the Arctic Circle, putting us deep into the Canadian Arctic. Take a look at this place. This tiny hamlet has been occupied for 4,000 years. Living here takes one strong, cold-weathered soul. You were born in an igloo?
Yeah.
In the middle of winter?
Show me.
Despite its ancient roots, this is home to a high-tech, brand-new Arctic research facility.
There could be some state-of-the-art research being done here, of course, located in the middle of the Arctic.
Another research lab is on a massive ship. Our original plan for this documentary was to meet with the crew, a team of scientists and students making their way across the frozen Arctic. Unfortunately, by the time we landed, that story had melted away. They never made it this far. They ran aground in the unpredictable frozen sea. Their plan is to try again another year. But that doesn't help us. Here we were, a documentary film crew in the Arctic with no story. It happens. But on our first night up here, as the sun was setting, something truly magical happened. Out of nowhere, this sailboat appeared on the horizon. Sure, we lost our original story, but the story we found, the one that accidentally sailed our way, was so much more than we could ever plan. What is the name of the ship?
Infinity.
The Infinity. It's the story of this sailboat, its crew of 22, and their voyage to the very top of the planet. This is beautiful. We have kids on board. We have a family on board. They are traveling to get from one side of the Arctic to the other. Hello, this is
nice to meet you.
120-foot sailboat,
Yeah,
and you're
it
the
is.
captain?
That's me.
And you're trying to get through the Northwest Passage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, trying is the right way to say it, because this year is terribly difficult, it seems.
500 400 years ago, the kings and queens of Europe were searching for that fabled Northwest Passage, a way to get from Europe all the way over to Asia through the Arctic. But it wasn't open until fairly recently in human history. This is it, the Northwest Passage.
Welcome to the bow. We sit here to look for ice and other things up to get us.
Thick ice has always clogged the Northwest Passage, but that all changed in the year 2007. That was the first year the passage stayed substantially ice-free, just enough to clear a path for big cruise ships and cargo container vessels.
According to the ice charts, this sea right here is supposed to be 80% covered with ice. Well, it's not.
The dream of the 1490s is now alive at the top of the world. 2007 blew away all previous ice loss records, but there is still ice up here. Making it across can be as dangerous as ever. The Infinity is headed right into that danger. The forecast calls for ice. Thick, unbreakable ice already showing up on radar.
What do we got here?
Got some nice ice.
First ice?
We saw like a tiny dot on the horizon.
Yeah,
You
very
can see it
cool.
right there.
19th of July. I wonder when the next day is we're going to see with no ice.
The ice maze is closing up for this captain and his patchwork crew from around the world. Peter from Sweden, Tim from Australia, Ruben and Tara from Germany, Gracie from Minneapolis, Victor from France in the center, and the captain's little girls, Chloe and Rayanne.
Hiya!
That's them.
Want to catch it? Want to catch it too?
Snowball fighting and sledding on an iceberg. What's it like to grow up on a ship that rocks back and forth, dodging icy danger?
Sometimes it rocks so much that you can play in the rocking. And even sometimes you can slide in the rocking if you're a kid. That's what I was talking about.
Our mission now is to follow them through thick and thin ice and learn a little bit about the Arctic along the way. But the odds are really stacked against us here. Will the Infinity crew find their way through the ice or wind up like so many before them? Stranded here until the ocean unfreezes next year.
The weather for the next week doesn't look exactly promising. They've sent out incredible expeditions without realizing how harsh, unnavigable these waters actually are. And they finally confirmed that there is such a passage, but hundreds of people paid for that discovery with their lives.
For the Infinity expedition, Victory would be planting this custom-built totem pole on the nearly impossible to get to Arctic ice shelf. But blinding fog, fierce storms, and ship-sinking icebergs stand in their way. But you know what? Let's go for it. Every once in a while, you find a story so important and so crazy, you throw away your previous expectations and climb towards the unknown. Stick with us, we will be right back. When we last checked in, this sailboat was trying to accomplish what was once impossible.
Everybody on deck. Ice poles out.
Watch out, careful, wheels turning.
Wheels turning.
Complete a journey through the icebergs at the top of our planet. And we're along for the ride. The captain and his crew have to manually steer the ship as mariners of the past did, with shivering hands on a wooden wheel.
And it's still impossible to steer this boat.
The freezing water is moving, the ship is moving, the wind is moving, and the jagged icebergs are spinning around in this colossal blender. This dangerous path is called the Northwest Passage. Tell me what the Northwest Passage is.
The Northwest Passage is a sea route across the North of America from the Atlantic to the Pacific, or vice versa. You can go west to east or east to west. The first explorers that did that voyage started somewhere from Europe. It's been a century-long endeavor to even find out if there is such a passage.
It's not the 1500s anymore. This is the morning of July 26, 2018. And that is still an open question. Does this path exist for them? Or will they end up frozen in place until the summer thaw? They have made it as far as Kaktovik, Alaska, where the ice has become much thicker much earlier than anyone expected. The only way to get through this section is to slip the vessel past the ice by hugging the coast here. This is a giant maze each ship must solve for themselves. Fancy radar and satellites can only get you so far.
There's 2 meters, 1 meter.
It's underwater, it's much bigger.
It's that thing right now.
Just navigating the ice is dangerous, surprisingly low-tech work, all manual labor. One person stands up here, way up here, in the crow's nest and looks out for the ice. As they see it, they radio down to a person on the front of the boat with a stick who pushes these pieces of ice. Maybe one's the size of a soccer ball, maybe one's the size of a car, trying to navigate away from these chunks of ice, like a game of asteroids trying to get through space, but this is happening all in real life in the Northwest Passage. How do you pay for all this? This isn't cheap.
No, it's not at all, and it's from the hand to the mouth. I've been broke for the last 35 years, so I ran away from home when I was 13 and never really went back.
Clemens Erschreich, the ship's German-born skipper, is all in on this journey. Every penny, every piece of his life is here.
It's not so good to actually, worry.
His American-born wife, Sage, is here. And where were you born?
In Thailand.
Their little ones here as well, battling the ice on a ship of strangers who never look back.
Let's not be fooled here. This is as dangerous as sailing in heavy winds.
Every crew member contributes to a share of the expenses, which doesn't nearly cover the voyage.
You see, each crew member must ask themselves, why do this? Is it worth it, especially with children?
I thought a lot about if it was a right decision or if I was doing it for selfish reasons.
She was putting herself here, isolated from any kind of help, relying on each other's unique skills.
Yeah, we just went for it.
We were cracking through the ice, and it was like, ah!
The biggest challenge is sharing your life with people in an intimate space.
Almost 24 people in small quarters.
We have to trust people almost automatically.
They are looking to experience something new in their lives, so they're leaving with, a lot of hopes and expectations while bringing all their baggage along.
I was born in a small town in Wyoming, in Cody, Wyoming. I realized that life was not me.
So why do they risk it all with the kids on board?
My kids had never seen snow or ice before. They grew up in the tropics, sailing the warm waters of the Pacific.
I think that it's a great opportunity for the kids, just to be close to nature.
You have to sit all the way on the bottom, man, no standing up.
Kids don't get to have these kind of adventures other places in the world.
Well, me and Rian does.
Having icebergs walk, or polar bears walk very close to the boat.
Every member of this crew, this family really, has put their life on hold and their limbs at risk to show the world what's happening in the Arctic. It's more than just an iceberg snowball fight.
I froze straight at the data and went all over her. And even I couldn't see her so much. I could only see her a little bit. Oh, Tommy, you left some of my nose.
Despite what it looks like up close, zoom out and you'll see the ice melting away faster every year.
I feel very passionate about our planet, and I think a lot of us need to remember that we are really part of her, that we're part of this ecosystem, Earth.
But they are just one crew out of 17 sailing ships trying to cross the Northwest Passage in 2018. There's a long way to go if they're going to make it out of the icebergs, pummeling through the Arctic Ocean. This is a team of hardened souls on a mission of hope and discovery. Their only protection from the harsh weather? This tough little ship.
She's made out of concrete, sort of an egg made of rock.
Infinity, the most biggest boat that we've seen.
You know, I feel like my kids are really getting exposed to what's important to me. And it's rough. Sometimes it's raw, for sure. It's hard sometimes.
They don't know it yet, but the ocean ahead is about to get rough as well.
There's ice everywhere, big giant chunk of ice that could potentially sink the ship.
It's the morning of August 3rd, 2018, on a 4,000-mile journey through the Arctic, and the weather forecast does not look good. A thick blanket of fog has covered the sea where Gordon, Alaska meets the Canadian Yukon. But the crew of the Infinity can't see any international borders here.
When you're in the middle of pack ice and all of a sudden you see nothing.
Captain Clemens Erschreich knows each iceberg hidden in the fog could be their doom. Dangerous icebergs mostly sit underwater. That glimmering top part is the only warning you get.
You kind of go blind, staring into this gray mist.
Clemens is not one to shy away from a challenge easily.
Documentary filmmaker and Infinity shipmate Nico Edwards recorded this dangerous fog on one of his drones. That is, before it crashed into the sea forever.
Landing a drone on a sailing ship in high wind is very hard.
Nico was also with the Infinity when they did the exact opposite of this trip and went to Antarctica at the bottom of the world.
Infinity's taken on so much water. Her bow is riding noticeably lower in the water, and she's digging ever deeper into the waves.
His documentary, Sea Gypsies, The Far Side of the World, has picked up awards at film festivals from all over. In fact, that's how some of the crew members got here. They saw the film and signed up.
We've been filming for over a year now.
He hopes to do it again, but first, they have to make it past this foggy gauntlet of frozen ocean.
We installed a steampunk battering ram made out of used car tires and just pummeled our way through the ice.
As they pushed through the fog, you can barely make out what look like early nuclear-age domes on the U.S.-Canadian border. These are echoes of another danger in the Arctic.
So back in the early days of the Cold War, the American government wanted a system to figure out if Soviet bombers were on their way. These radio towers would detect incoming Soviet bombers and later ICBMs.
The remote radar stations of the distant early warning system, which we call the Dew Line.
These sites weren't just in Alaska, they were all over the Canadian Arctic as well, so that's why you see a Canadian and American flag here.
But don't go thinking about this as the past. A potential new battle with the Russians is brewing right here. No matter how you stand politically, a warming Arctic means ice is becoming open ocean, with oil to be drilled and new shipping routes worth billions. We found the U.S. Marine Corps already training on the mountainous border between California and Nevada.
As the Arctic warms, there are pathways that are opening up there, and people are going to jockey for position up there. Is that part of the reason why the people are here?
There's certainly a lot more discussion about the Arctic, about cold weather, etc., but we need to be prepared to operate in any environment, across the globe.
This is the first real phase of it, where we take Marines that in many cases have been stationed by the coasts, never seen the snow before, never been on skis before, how to really live and then thrive in this environment.
0 to 100.
Yeah, 0 to 100, absolutely.
The whole world is watching these big changes in the Arctic. Think about it. If the Infinity can make it through, massive icebreakers could certainly build a brand new superhighway for cargo ships from Asia.
I think a lot of people would argue that that's a very dangerous thing because the Arctic is an extremely sensitive place.
You can see the change for yourself as our crew passes ancient permafrost cliffs just falling into the warming ocean. Permafrost, or frozen ground, is the world's refrigerator. Warming the Arctic unplugs the fridge, and those old dead plants and animals, they start to rot and release methane, a very effective warming gas. Ironically, our friends on the ship could sure use some of that heat right now.
2 days of battling intense ice. We barely made it out.
There is an icy superhighway at the top of our globe.
A part of the world that few people ever get to see.
And this sailboat is trying to make it across before winter literally freezes them in place.
Being battered by very large chunks of ice left and right.
This is Infinity, a tough as concrete sailing ship built in the late 70s. Her captain responsible for 22 souls here, including these little girls.
Well, these girls were born on the ship, and and here we are in the Arctic.
Strap in. This is their 4,000-mile journey through the icebergs.
It's breaking away nicely. It's quite thin.
Ice chunks scratching away at the side of your ship isn't the best way to wake up, so it's slow going today, and if the goal is to make it from Alaska to Europe,
Small chunk of ice dead ahead, 5 meters.
victory is still a long way off.
Then you look at the radar, and the radar is just somebody spilled a bunch of cereal on a plate, and every piece of cereal is yet another big, giant chunk of ice that could potentially sink the ship.
Oh man, we are just caning through the ice at a brisk, what would you say, 7 knots? Well, we slowed down a little bit now.
The fear is Infinity freezing in place, not for a day, not for a week, but
for months. Weeks and months.
It's August 16th, and pathways are quickly disappearing, along with hope.
Ice ahead 20 meters.
You know, we have no insurances, we have no safety network, no backup, no, I haven't been to the dentist for years.
Crossing the Arctic has been a dream for centuries. In 1845, Sir John Franklin tried to make it across what's called the Northwest Passage with these huge English ships. The mission failed. These frozen bodies from that expedition weren't recovered until 1986. One of the ships wasn't even seen again until 2016.
So I think we sort of experienced the Northwest Passage like it used to be in the days of Franklin.
And just like those 19th century ships, Infinity is now frozen in place in the unforgiving Canadian Arctic.
We were told by the Coast Guard that it's definitely not going to happen this year. So even if we sail all the way up here, I want to see where the kind of northern edge of the ice is.
Not far past Alaska, the ice formed all around them, and they wouldn't move forward again for a month.
We're not well insulated and we don't have a heater. It's really cold, and I think it would be really uncomfortable if we had to winter over.
The captain's wife doesn't want the kids and crew going through something like that. When she says wintering over, that means
frozen in, spending the whole winter in utter darkness.
The only thing they can do here is push the icebergs away with a pole. This time of year, this far north, the sun does not set, so they do this in shifts. Someone always on ice watch.
All of the boats that were behind us decided that this wasn't the summer for them, and they headed back to port.
From space, you can see how the melting ice caps are shifting this ice pack around. Some places actually have more ice.
The ice was in all kinds of different places.
We didn't think the ice would be quite as southerly as it was.
Carbon in the atmosphere causes sunlight to build up in the Arctic. Shiny white ice should reflect that heat back out into space, but when ice melts, the dark ocean underneath just absorbs the heat, exposing ancient forests that rot and release more carbon. Infinity saw it up close.
Just massive erosion along the coast as we go.
So, how do scientists actually know how much carbon is coming out of the Arctic? Simple. They set up a series of computerized noses, digital sniffers across the top of the world. So we're arriving at the Permafrost monitoring station now? This is it?
Thank you for taking us.
We hitched a ride with Dr. Min-Jun Kwon and her team of scientists from South Korea who have set up this monitoring station across Alaska, Canada, Greenland, Iceland, Norway, and Russia.
There is huge amount of carbon stored in this soil.
As the Arctic warms, that carbon is exposed. We saw it from underground.
This permafrost here is solid. Very solid material. You can build tunnels inside of it.
Back above ground, these robots are here to collect the evidence. However, sniffing gas from way up in the air is a little bit more difficult.
He's gonna climb the carbon monitoring station with the 360 camera.
We attached a 360 virtual reality camera to Juya Yoon's backpack.
So what are those sensors up there?
This sensor is the gas analyzer.
So you gather the data in a flash drive or a hard drive and then bring it back to analyze it?
To Korea, yeah.
So if the permafrost were to thaw here, it would release carbon dioxide?
And methane.
And methane is a much better greenhouse gas.
Yeah, it's stronger greenhouse gas.
Traps the sunlight really well.
There's a lot of dramatic environmental change happening here.
While we were out with the Korean scientists, our fearless crew was back on Infinity, pushing icebergs out of the way.
Pushing against large pieces somehow seems to work, but it's not actually the ice that's moving, it's the boat that's moving. So you're pushing the boat away from the ice rather than the ice away from the boat.
Bring it here. Let's get that iceberg over here.
And to kill some time, a few crew members got it in their head.
This is how we shower in the Arctic.
To take a swim.
The ocean temperature was dropping well below zero.
Oh my God!
You know, the body has all kinds of reaction to the cold, and as long as you understand what your body is doing, you can spend a surprising amount of time in ice cold water. It's painful, I tell you that. I did it too. It's so painful. but afterwards you feel really rejuvenated.
Problem is my eyeballs burn really bad. I can't see anything.
Thank you, dang! This is the ocean!
Yeah, baby.
But Peter's not the only one swimming around in there. The Arctic is teeming with life, big and small.
So my name's Arti Ramachandran, and I study bacteria in the Arctic Ocean.
Lots of potholes. Make sure that you go slow.
It's important to study bacteria because climate change is affecting the Arctic Ocean before it really affects all the southern areas. And so bacteria are fast to evolve and adapt. You know, humans live to what, like 75, 80 years? And I mean, you can have multiple bacterial generations in just one day.
You get that? She's saying they can use the bacteria to look at the Arctic in fast forward motion. This team can study what larger animals and future humans can expect as the ice down there quickly changes in all kinds of ways.
Places where you used to have, you know, thick 10-year-old ice, and now you're barely getting 1-year ice.
So we're using the Niskin bottles to capture some water from depth. When carbon is emitted anywhere globally, so respiration through plants or through emissions from your cars, it goes into the atmosphere. And then the atmosphere is kind of like a big holding tank for carbon, but it's constantly being exchanged with the ocean.
So this collects water from different depths, and so we put it down to whatever depth we want to collect water at.
The poles are kind of the, I guess, the canary in the coal mine for what's happening around the globe.
And we, as researchers, are really fortunate that we get to come up here and that we get to conduct our research up here. There's a whole universe of microbes just living inside of this tiny amount of water. And so we are just wondering, you know, who's there, what are they doing, and how are they changing with climate change?
Here you see an ice chart that describes the departure from normal ice concentration. All the areas red have much lower ice than the last 30 years.
Finally, that ice melt they have been looking for is dead ahead.
So it's exciting, very exciting.
Things are looking good for the crew of the Infinity. After months of fighting Arctic ice, they have made their way from Alaska through the Canadian Arctic, past the hamlet of Cambridge Bay, and today, in early September 2018, they are facing one more ice maze.
15 miles, low to the horizon, very low land.
A wicked ice pack around King William Island has them pacing back and forth, hoping to find that magic moment when the icebergs move out of the way and let them pass.
You can't really rely on a forecast for more than 2-3 days. Things change all the time.
Winter is closing in fast. Their only path out of here is through another 1,600 miles of icy ocean.
Even then, we weren't in safety yet. We were still in the middle of the Arctic.
Standing on the top of the world here, you can really feel a sense of isolation. It's almost like you're on your own little planet, right? But the Inuit, the people who have lived here for thousands and thousands of years, have this generational knowledge about the way that the Earth and humans interact. That information is vital to scientists.
Remember that Arctic research lab we passed in Cambridge Bay? Well, scientists are just about to open it, so as they finished construction, we hopped on a motorboat with a plywood windshield to see if we could catch some fish.
So how old are you now?
62.
62. What's the difference that you've seen in the sea ice?
Seems like the ice gets thinner a lot faster than years ago.
Mark Hongok is a local hunter and fisherman out here taking advantage of the unusual ice distribution this year. Mark and his family found this ice-free pocket and scored a boatload of Arctic char. Traditionally, Inuit men catch the fish, then women use this razor-sharp knife called an ulu to cut the char and pack it away for their family and neighborhood elders so they can last those dark, freezing months ahead.
So I like my country food a lot.
Country food?
Yeah.
That's
I
what
call that country food because it's from the land, eh?
The Inuit people thrive in this ice. This is home.
You were born in an igloo?
Yeah.
In the middle of winter?
Also me.
Yet home is changing.
The weather gonna change someday. Someday it sure did.
It's not just the Arctic that's changing. What's happening in the Arctic will have an influence around the globe. My name is Alain Leclerc, and I'm the director of the Science and Technology program here at Polar Knowledge Canada.
This Canadian High Arctic Research Station is a high-tech lab in the middle of the ice. Everything you've seen so far comes together here.
Climate change is affecting the Arctic at a much faster rate than anywhere else.
The microbiologists, the Inuit fishermen, the greenhouse gas collectors on that tower, they all pass through this one building exchanging ideas.
The kind of grand design is for it to be a research hub.
So you'll have the scientists who come from all over the world talking with the natives who live here.
They've been here longer, they know a lot about things that we don't know about.
Before middle of July, usually no more ice around here.
And this is something a PhD in a lab would never know.
Wow, yeah. Unless you've been out there for quite a bit of time.
What's happening here affects everyone. As the Arctic warms, sea levels rise in places like Miami. Research suggests the jet stream will slow over the U.S., creating more volatile weather patterns. These are big problems that need big solutions.
Large parts of the Arctic are just on the move, you know, big chunks of ice that in past years maybe stayed all locked together as one piece are now breaking apart and drifting about with currents. The ice was in all kinds of different places.
As hunters elsewhere in the Arctic dealt with too little ice, the crew of the Infinity is dealing with too much. Just like the collaborating scientists, Captain Clem is coming up with his own way of raising awareness. Along with filmmaker Nico Edwards, they are making their polar documentaries. And
I feel we need a lot of a vision for a positive future.
Captain Clem is launching a new social media network called Earth Today.
Let's go up and look at the totem pole.
Yeah.
Here, on top of the ship near the solar panels, there is a physical symbol of that mission.
Our intention is to raise this pole on the retreating Arctic ice sheet, and it is to be a flagpole for a flag for our planet Earth.
It's now September 16th, 2018, and there it is. The final pathway through the icebergs. Ironically, it opened up in the Franklin Strait, named for that doomed Northwest Passage mission more than a century ago. There's only one thing left to do. Grab that totem pole.
And finally, we are here amongst the ice of the polar north. Here we are. It's all led to this one single moment.
The Infinity Expedition has beaten the odds. 4,000 miles through the icebergs of the Northwest Passage, they can practically taste victory in the salty air. Just one more storm stands in their way, and it is a doozy.
Within 24 hours, we got hammered really hard, about twice as hard as I had forecasted. That first gale especially was really pretty rough. 20-foot seas, sails torn, crew worn down. It was quite intense.
After that storm, it was on with the mission. Their goal is to get as close to the North Pole as they can and raise a flag to spread awareness of what's going on here in the Arctic. These frozen pathways are melting away more and more each year. The coming oil exploration and shipping routes across the top of the world will change the geopolitical game. Who will control this new superhighway? A warming Arctic is already affecting the entire world, a global human challenge we all share.
Welcome to the far outer edge of the northern polar ice cap.
And just to reach solid enough ice, that ice cap meant that we had to go through a lot of ice flows until we found this ideal sheet of ice with hills on it, and it's just magnificent.
I'd like to introduce you to a very important part of our boat. This totem pole here has been sitting proudly on the deck of Infinity ever since we picked it up in Vanuatu, where it was found in the jungle after it fell by natural causes from a tropical storm. It was then carved in a little hut on the outskirts of Port Vila, and ever since it's been standing on our deck. We've come to love this totem pole. It's seen us through ice, rain, snow, and now today is going to serve its final purpose, which is to fly a flag for planet Earth here in the far north of the planet.
And right at that point, the weather was snowing, and took the pole, this beautiful hand-carved totem pole, ashore. And we had to hack a hole into the ice.
And finally, we are here amongst the ice of the polar north. Here we are. It's all led to this one single moment.
Used the whole team to raise this pole up and raise the flag up on it, and we had all the country flags surrounding it to symbolize that we are one world together on this planet. And then the sun came out, and it was just such a scenery. It was unbelievable.
Take a moment to think about what they've accomplished here. Just getting to this remote spot at the top of the Earth took a large chunk of the summer, but the ice is melting away. Summer 2018 was the 4th lowest ice extent on record. Each year, we're losing nearly 18,000 square miles of ice, along with its cooling ability for the rest of the planet.
We have only this one planet. We really need to make things work together.
This is an opportunity to connect to people in a different way.
To bring awareness that we all need to work together.
There's real trouble brewing in the Arctic, but this is not a gloom and doom story.
There is a lot of ice still. There are polar bears. We've seen several. There is so much beauty here.
Did your kids see a polar bear?
Oh yeah, right, swimming right to us. I mean, there's so much beauty out there. There's so much worth saving, and that's, to me, is people need to see that there is this beautiful, beautiful, amazing natural world, this wonderful planet, these wonderful people, like the people here that we met, the Inuit people. So it'd be just nice if we could show more of that.
From the spot on the polar ice cap where they planted that flag to the last place they would encounter ice is still another 800 or 900 miles. This is the final stretch over to Disco Bay, Greenland, and ultimately over to Europe. In 2018, 17 sailing ships tried to cross the Northwest Passage.
And 2 made it. So we were the one ship that made it from west to east, and there was one boat that made it somehow from east to west on the other side and were able to complete the passage.
Any attacks? Get that little piece of ice.
It gives one hope that there is still a lot of ice in the Arctic.
He faints left, he faints right. He's got to psych that ice out. Ice will not know what hit it. Rapidi is an expert. And he plunges into its vile heart.
It's been an interesting Northwest Passage.
2 days into the Atlantic, with still, maybe up to 2 weeks to go. We had some really lovely wind. The rest of the way, we had a beautiful sail.
The storms, the icebergs, the adventure were now behind them. Ahead was Amsterdam. This is where the Infinity crew floats back into city life, their day jobs, and a time to say goodbye.
What we really were looking forward to is meeting up with all these friends and family. We had a big party.
So my fellow sailors, thank you for taking me to Amsterdam. It's been a pleasure. The food could have been a bit better. Next time, do a better job. Thanks.
Beans. What? You said beans.
No, of course you know that you did it. You made it. You brought me here. Kept my family, children safe. Thank you very much. This is it. We're here.
I think we have a job to do together to keep our planet safe, try and figure out how we can live peacefully and prosperous together and sustainable without hurting the planet or one another. And having a chance to see this nature like that firsthand, the Arctic is such a magnificent place.